The one right way to manage people. In no other area are the basic traditional assumptions held as firmly, tough mostly subconsciously as in respect to people and their management. And in no other area are they so totally at odds with reality and so totally counterproductive. There is one right way to manage people, or at least three should be. This assumption underlies practically every book or paper on the management of people. Its most quoted exposition is Douglas MacGregor's book, The Human Side of Enterprise, 1960s, which asserted that managements have to choose between the two and only two different ways of managing people, Theory X and Theory Y, and which then asserted that Theory Y is only sound one. A little earlier I had said pretty much the same thing in my 1954 book, The Practice of Management. A few years later, Abraham H. Maslow, 1908 to 1970, showed in his Eusikian Management, 1962, new edition 1995, entitled Maslow's Own Management, that both MacGregor and I were dead wrong. He showed conclusively that different people have to be managed differently. I became an immediate convert. Maslow's evidence is overwhelming, but to date every few people have paid much attention. On this fundamental assumption that there is or at least should be, one and only one right way to manage people, less all the other assumptions about people in an organization and their management. One of these assumptions is that the people who work for organizations are employees of organizations working full-time and dependent on their organization for their livelihood and their careers. Another such assumption is that the people who work for an organization are subordinate. Indeed, it is assumed that the great majority of people have either no skill or low skills and do what they were being assigned to do. What they are being assigned to do. Well, they are pretty much slave, right? 80 years ago, when these assumptions were first formulated at the end of the World War I, they conformed close enough to reality to be considered valid. Today, every one of them has become untenable. The majority of people who work for an organization may still be employees of their organization, but a very large and steadily growing minority, though working for the organization, are no longer its employee, let alone its full-time employees. They work for an outsourcing contractor, for example, the outsourcing firm that provides the maintenance in a hospital or a manufacturing plant, or the outsourcing firm that runs the data processing system for a government agency or a business. They are temps or part-timers. Increasingly, they are individuals, contractors working on a retailer or for a specific contracting period. This is particularly true of the most knowledgeable and therefore the most valuable people working for the organization. Even if employed full-time by their organizations, fewer and fewer people are subordinate, even in very low-level jobs. Increasingly, they are knowledge workers, and knowledge workers are not subordinates; they are associates. For once beyond their This strange knowledge workers must know more about their job than their boss does, or else they are no good at all. In fact, that they know more about their job than anybody else in the organization is a part of the definition of knowledge workers. And to this, that today's superiors usually have not held the jobs their subordinates hold, as they did only a few short decades ago, and as still is widely assumed they do. A regimental commander in the army only a few decades ago had held every one of the jobs of his subordinates: battalion commander, company commander, platoon commander. The only difference in these respective jobs between the lowly platoon commander and the lordly regimental commander was in the number of people each commands. The work they did was exactly alike. To be sure, today's regimental commanders have commanded troops earlier in their careers, but often for a short period only. They also have advanced through a captain and major, but for the most of their careers, they have held very different arguments in staff jobs, in research jobs, in teaching jobs, attached to their own embassy abroad, and so on. They simply can no longer assume that they know what their subordinates, the captain in charge of the company, is doing or trying to do. They have been captains, of course, but they may have never commanded a company. Wow. Similarly, the vice president of marketing may have come up the sales route. He or she knows a great deal about selling, but knows nothing about market research, pricing, packaging, service, sales forecasting. The marketing vice president therefore cannot possibly tell the experts in the marketing department what they should be doing, and how. Yet, they are supposed to be the marketing vice president's subordinates, and the marketing vice president is definitely responsible for their performance and for their contribution to the company's marketing efforts. The same is true for the hospital administrator or the hospital's medical director in respect to the trained knowledge workers in the clinical laboratory or in the physical therapy. To be sure, these associates are subordinate in that they depend on the boss when it comes to being hired or fired, promoted, appraised, and so on. But in his or her own job, the superior can perform only if these so-called subordinates take responsibility for educating him or her, that is, for making the superior understand what market research or physical therapy can do and should be doing, and what results are in their respective areas. In turn, these subordinates depends on the superior for direction. They depend on the superior to tell them what the score is. Their relationship, in other words, is far more like that between the conductor of the orchestra and the instrumentalist than it is like the traditional superior-subordinate relationship. Wow. The superior in the organization employing knowledge workers cannot, as a rule, do the work of the supposed subordinate any more than the conductor of an orchestra can play the tuba. In turn, the knowledge worker is dependent on the superior to give the direction and, above all, to define what the score is for the entire organization. That is, what are its standards and values, performance and results. And just an orchestra can sabotage even the ablest conductor, and certainly even the most autocratic one. A knowledge organization can easily sabotage even the ablest, let alone the most autocratic superior. Altogether, an increasing number of people who are full-time employees have to be managed as if they were volunteers. They are paid, to be sure, but knowledge workers have mobility. They can leave. They own their means of production, which is their knowledge. We have known for 50 years that money alone does not motivate to perform. Dissatisfaction with money grossly demotivates. Satisfaction with money is, however, mainly a hygiene factor, as Frederick Hartzberg called it all of 40 years ago in his 1959 book, The Motivation to Work. What motivates, and especially what motivates knowledge workers, is what motivates volunteers. Wow. Volunteers, we know, have to get more satisfaction from their work than paid employees, precisely because they do not get a paycheck. They need, above all, challenge. They need a challenge. They need to know the organization's missions and to believe in it. They need continual training. They need to see results. Implicit in this is that the different groups in the work population have to be managed differently, and that the same group in the work population has to be managed differently at different times. Increasingly, employees have to be managed as partners, and it is a definition of their partnership that all partners are equal. It is also a definition of their partnership that partner cannot be ordered. They have to be persuaded. Increasingly, therefore, the management of people is a marketing job, and in the marketing, one does not begin with the question, what do we want? One begins with the questions, what does the other partner want? What are its values? What are its goals? What does it consider results? And this is neither theory X nor theory Y, nor any other specific theory of managing people. Maybe we will have to redefine the task altogether. It may not be meaning the work of people. It may not be managing the work of people. The starting point, both in theory and in the practice, may have to be managing for performance. The starting point may be a definition of the result, just as the starting point of boss and the orchestra conductor and the football coach are the score. The productivity of the knowledge worker is likely to become as the center of management of people, just as the work on the productivity of the manual worker became the center of management people 100 years ago. That is, says Frederick W. Taylor. This will require, above all, very different assumptions about people in the organization and their work. One does not manage people. The task is to lead people, and the goal is to make productive the specific strengths and knowledge of each individual. Phew!